Well, good day, everyone, and welcome to this Renaissance Executive Forum's Expert Insight. My name is John Affleck. I am the COO for North America, and we want to jump right in here today. We've got a great topic. Like it or not, the budgeting season is upon us, and the vestiges of 2021, the impact of inflation and supply chain disruptions will greatly influence strategic decisions in 2022. One of the best ways that you can drive your business forward is to generate more cash. And we are very much benefited today by an expert in that area. Charlie Smith is joining us. He is the CEO for North America of Expense Reduction Analysts. Charlie is a seasoned and accomplished executive who has direct executive leadership experience in leading supply chain, manufacturing, product development, engineering, real estate, and human resources companies in over 70 different countries, with most of those companies being 300 million or more in revenue. What Charlie is really bringing to us today is his expertise not only in supply chain management, but in cash flow operations and enterprise value stream. And he brings that on the platform of Six Sigma manufacturing. He's used this in many of these companies to drive operational improvement when companies were distressed. He's also helped introduce cash generating processes to rapidly expand companies. He just told me a wonderful story about Young Living Oil that went from, I think it was like 30 million to well over $1 billion in the last 2 decades that he was a part of generating. And the last thing is, what I really believe Charlie can bring to the table for us is the capacity to transform, to bring game-changing continuous improvement that all of us need. Because as Marshall Goldsmith says, what got us to here is not enough to get us to there. So would you all really give Charlie Smith a very warm welcome? He's going to share with us a platform for how to approach price negotiation that gets that cash generation going. And while he's presenting, we want to, as always, invite you to put your comments or your Q&A or your questions into the comment section. We'll come back and answer those just a little bit later. So Charlie, welcome, and thank you for being with us today.
It's good to be here. Thanks, John. I gotta remember to share with my wife my resume sometimes. It makes me sound so awesome. All right, let me have the fun of sharing my screen real quick and see if it's going to let me. I love doing this. I'm traveling, so it's nice to try to get this working correctly. So I'm going to need your help on making sure that we're pulling up the right things. John, can you see my slides okay?
Maybe if we advance the slide, Charlie.
Yeah, but you are seeing my screen?
Yes.
You see my pretty face? All right. Well, thanks, John. I appreciate that. So you're going to be tempted, CEOs. You're going to be multitasking. You got emails to do. You got things that you're trying to accomplish. And I get it, believe me. ERA, expense reduction analysts, we're over 700 consultants in over 40 different countries.
Charlie, let me interrupt for a second. I apologize. Yeah. The screen is more or less minimized right now, and I'm wondering if it's on your side.
All I can see is my screen, yeah. So yeah. Let's make sure it's not minimized. But
Hi,
you
Charlie.
can see. Yeah.
Just making sure that we're seeing your StreamYard screen right now. Make sure that you're sharing your PowerPoint slide, please.
Yeah. So are you able to see any of that right now?
No, I think you just stopped sharing.
All right, let's try it again. We love technology. Let's try it again, guys.
Of course.
All right. And there it is now. How about that?
Not yet. There, no, it was going, it was about to. I think there's a little delay.
There we go.
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay, we'll jump off now. Thank you,
All
Charlie.
right. There you go. No problem. I appreciate the technical help. Since we've all had to deal with COVID and we've gone to video calls like this, we've learned about strange people wandering into the background of our videos and things like that. So anyway, what we're going to talk about today a little bit, like I said, if you're going to have like one of your earbuds in, you're just kind of trying to multitask, I get it. But one of the things we're going to talk about really, and I want you to focus on, we look at the unsexy stuff, that general ledger, right? That's those spreadsheets that you look at, you're trying to budget for next year. Maybe some of you are looking at, you got some difficult choices to make, right? You've got so much money you're putting into labor, your people, which is, of course, your most important resource that you have. And you're wondering how you're going to do this, right? You got to save somewhere with inflation, with the risks that you've got going on. I think this will be pretty obvious to you about some things that this can help you with. If you go through this process, we're going to talk about, but I think a lot of it has to do with grabbing the opportunities that you have available in 2022, right? When we talk about generating cash, there's some things that you can do. And they're going to be, and I'm going to talk about very specifically, talking about one or two expenses that you have outside the people we're taking out, but one or two expenses that you have that will make a difference. And when I make a difference, it depends on the size of your company. But if you're able to focus at the depth that we're going to talk about today on this one or two expense, that means tens of thousands of dollars to you, right, in 2022, or hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? These are things that a consultant can't come in and just wave his or her magic wand and create for you. This is your own institutional knowledge. And when we go into the weeds here a little bit, I don't want you to get overwhelmed, because remember, you're only focusing on one or two expenses for all of 2022. Just pick one. So if you were like a chair manufacturer, right, that one expense could be the wood for that wood chair, right, or stain for that wood chair, or if it's a service or product. This is crucial to your business. Okay, so if you can keep framing this, and I'll keep referring back to it, but if you follow all of the steps that we're going to talk about today, you're going to really maximize the opportunity. If you follow key points that you jot down, you're going to see some success, right? And I want to make sure that we hit some of these. We also need to talk about, because 2021 has been particularly insane, coming off of COVID, 2020, is supply chain, right? We've got suppliers dropping us, right? Dropping you, long-term customers, right? If you did some things overseas, you saw what that did to you, right? Could almost wipe people out. So we're going to talk about that. How do you deal with inflation, right? How would you deal with inflation with negotiation, for instance, right? You're trying to do a better rate, but meanwhile, the prices are going up. So we're going to talk about those things. So we're going to agree, we're going to pinky swear together that we're not going to get overwhelmed as I go way into the weeds in the processing. But I want you to just, take the high notes. And then as CEOs, I want you to ask yourself the question, do I have the right person or people on my team looking at that one or two major expense that's going to make a difference for us in 2022? All right. So let's hit it. When I had a client once that we were doing multiple expense projects with, and the CFO really wanted us to look at small parcel, right? UPS, FedEx, DHL. They spent about $7 million a year on that type of freight. But the COO didn't want us to have anything to do with it. And we get it. We're like, hey, man, we do over 40 different categories. That's not something that, we're going to live or die on. But we'd seen so much success. I'd gotten a call from the CEO, somebody like you, that said, hey, Charlie, come on into my office. I want to talk to you real quick. And that's never, none of us want to get called to the CEO's office, even if we're the CEO. And I remember going in there, and at this awkward moment, I had the CFO on one side, the COO on the other, and the CEO in front of me. And I don't know if I was there as a third-party witness or whatever else, but I remember the CEO asking the COO, saying, "Hey, we've got this big expense here. These guys at ERA have done a good job for us. Now, why don't you want us taking a look at small parcel?" "Well, Kenny down in shipping?" "Yeah, we know Kenny. He's the shipping manager. He's awesome. He's a great employee." "Yeah, he's fantastic," the COO says. And he says, "Well, but Kenny says he's going to walk if we even contemplate using another supplier." And the CEO just turns to the COO and says, "We love Kenny. He's fantastic. In fact, we're going to give him a wonderful letter of recommendation, for him to find on his new job. It doesn't make any sense for him not to have us take a look at this stuff because he's afraid, of walking, right?" And so, needless to say, we had a good chat. It's one of those moments we go in and we had a good sit down with Kenny. Say, "Hey, Kenny, what are you looking for? We're not here to change some things, and you as CEOs need to take the same sit down approach. Say, hey, this is non-threatening. Let's find out what's best for the company." And I remember sitting with Kenny, and I said, "Look, what makes your current supplier so great?" And he listed a few things. He goes, "But the biggest thing, how special we are to this? This company," he says, "their account manager comes in every week." He goes, "I mean, every Friday. And he just doesn't get donuts for the my staff here, for the whole warehouse." He goes, "That's 25 people he's bringing donuts for every Friday, doesn't miss." He says, "We all look forward to this." I said, "Okay, I get that, Kenny." And honestly, I said, anything we look at in the future, we'll make sure donuts are included. But the long story short is, ladies and gentlemen, is that those donuts were costing them about $1.2 million a year because they weren't looking to switch, and the supplier had been with them for 7 years, doing an outstanding job for them. But they didn't adjust. The supplier didn't adjust to the increased value of the business and the volume. And they were using old agreements that had tier structures, and that's great, but they didn't move where they needed to, right? And so at a $1.2 million a year, by not just double checking and benchmarking what prices they're paying, those were expensive donuts. And so I was able to convince them, say, "You know what, I bet you I can get any additional supplier for that kind of money to get you some really good donuts." But that's really kind of what we're getting at, guys. Especially CEOs. How are you going to even look at those kind of things? You're like, "Oh man, how am I supposed to dive into that?" And really, you're not really going to be looking at those things, right? Remember, let's go back to the one or two things that will really make a difference in your business. What I want you to do, we're going to have some fun real quick. And this is going to be testing your multitasking skills. Get your cameras out and scan that QR code. We're going to have a little bit of fun. You're going to get 8 questions. And we're going to find out what type of style you have. And more importantly, as a negotiator, how that affects, how you negotiate and what opportunities there are. And we'll do it quick. I mean, it's obviously a very surface driven quiz, but it's one that will kind of point out to, the type of, negotiator you are. But more importantly, I think you'll start thinking about who you have doing some of this stuff for you. That will be important. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes. So go ahead and answer those. If I had Jeopardy music, I'd play that, but we don't. So we'll have a nice awkward 3-minute silence. But let's go. Let's dig in. Okay, got a minute and a half left. Thirty seconds. Ten seconds. Okay. Well, good. You went through that exercise. It's great for some of you that are finishing up. Go ahead and do that. Let me talk. And at the end of the quiz, of course, you're getting a different, you'll get some feedback on what type of the 5 negotiating styles that you have. And you're probably nodding your head as you know this, right? Competitive, a lot of CEOs, you are competitive folks, right? And, one of the things as we go through these, recognize that you may use these, this is the default mode that you have, but there's some things that you're just not going to be very competitive on simply because it's just not worth your time, right? But the competitive person is the one that in the strengths are going to be focused, like laser focused in on negotiations. Weaknesses are you may default to, hey, just go back and sharpen your pencil, right? Type of attitude. And you just got to be aware of that going into it, right? You're very strategic. You want to win. And frankly, I would say about probably 30% of you are this way. Collaborative. You probably of this group, another 30% are right here. Your relationship builders, right? You're worried about preserving the relationships as you're negotiating. It matters what the other party thinks of you. You're thinking long-term, but not typically at the sacrifice of a good deal, but you just are trying to find the win-win. All right. Compromising. You probably have people like this in your organizations. There's not very many CEOs at all that have this trait. And that basically is you're going to cave, right? You're going to cave quickly, right? Because you really are trying to find middle ground, but in reality, you're really finding ground where you're not feeling the conflict, right? The accommodator. I'm guilty of this one. The overthinker. Right. You end up, you are so creative and so forward thinking in your negotiation style that the solution you come up with is so beautiful in every aspect, but almost impossible to implement. Okay. Some of us, I'm guilty at that. I always get to check myself at that. And we're going to talk about this last one, which I'm sure none of you are. And it doesn't really, anybody that's going to go to something called the art and science of price negotiation, the avoider, you're not one of them. However, you need to be aware of this one, right? Because it shows up in a surprising place. It shows up in purchasing. You're thinking, how is that possible, right? If your job is to be a buyer or a senior buyer or a senior manager in purchasing or a procurement director, well, here's what happens. People who come in entry level at lower level buyers, many of them have an outstanding quality of processing purchasing orders. They are fantastic at it, right? They keep the paper, the digital stream flowing. And what happens is they end up getting promoted. And sometimes and not just sometimes, but often they get promoted to positions where they should be in a position to negotiate certain expenses or certain things that they're buying. And they don't like it. Right. It throws off their groove. So they're really just kind of accepting terms. And where this becomes a major problem for you, and some of you are probably nodding your head, you may even have somebody that's high level in your procurement that is really just taking whatever the proposal is from the suppliers, right? Simply because they do not want to deal with it at all. They don't like it at all. They just want the baseline price, trust them on it, and away you go. So that's just one of the things you need to be aware of. It's usually your star employees that were stars at a lower level, and you keep promoting them, and they just don't have the skills necessary, or even the desire to be able to actually negotiate in a reasonable way. All right. So let's talk then about what type of style is best for negotiating price. Now, obviously, avoiding is not one of the ones you're going to want to have. But most of the ones we talked about, are fine for negotiating price. Not, we're not just talking about, regular negotiations. We're talking about price in particular. And as long as you're not a total jerk, it's very tough for you to sabotage it, right? So what we're going to talk then is about the systematizing of what process you need to go through in order to, work with your negotiation style. And where that will come to play is in the art side of it. But a lot of what we're going to talk about is the science side of it, right? The hard data. And both of them come into play very strongly. So think about your style versus how you'd approach it, in particular, the art side. Now, again, I don't want you to get overwhelmed. I'll probably keep repeating it. Think of that 1 or 2 major expenses for 2022 that you really need to take a look at. And just like, hey, I know that we spend a lot there. I'm not sure we know if that's even a decent terms, right? We think that we have good terms. We think we've got a good situation, but you just don't know, right? All right. So knowledge is power. You know this. So what's the big factor? It's knowledge. Well, you guys know this because when you go to buy a car today, is there any chance in the world with any sort of internet knowledge that you've got that you're going to get screwed on buying a new car? You're just not, right? I mean, because the apps that are available today is you can know not only how much a car should cost with all the options you want, the paint style that you want. You can know where it's located. And guess what? You know how much that car sold with all those options in your zip code last week, right? So what's happened? What's happened to the dealers? Well, the dealers don't make money off cars anymore, right? They're making it off the financing. Remember when cash was king? It's not king at a dealership anymore, right? They want you to finance, even if it's for 6 months, because they get a kickback from the credit union or their own finance company that really makes up that margin that they used to get on the margin on the car. And that's how they sell it below, right? And all the add-ons. And again, we're not talking about undercarriage spray protected anymore, right? I mean, the knowledge makes it the whole car buying experience totally different. And even on used cars, think what Carfax has done, right? For lemons and things like that. So think about if you had that kind of knowledge going into that major expense that we're talking about for you and your company, right? It's that major expense that only you guys should be able to work out, right? So how do you get that same knowledge, right? And that's what we're going to talk about. How do you get that knowledge? All right. You ready? Let's do it. First, you need to know yourself. What we mean by that is simply, hey, look at that expense we've been talking about and take a look at the spreadsheet, right? Get that general ledger out and how much you spend on that expense annually. And check for seasonality, right? And the way you're going to see that is look how it's broken out month to month. If you know the suppliers involved, you can easily see that in accounts payable, but you may not even know that completely, right? But you want to look at seasonality because then you know when you're buying it, how you're buying it, and you may have something that you buy seasonally, but that you sell on a regular basis. So it's something to consider. Make sure you know. And again, as CEOs, you may not go through this exercise yourself, but you want to make sure your people that are, or your key member of your executive team, as they're looking at this particular process for that one expense for 2022, that they're looking at these things. All right. How many suppliers are you working with for that expense? Right. Again, take a look at your accounts payable. That will get you in the right direction. And now you're going to have to start, there's a lot of that stuff that's pretty easy now, but then you can ask, how good are your suppliers? Okay. Now, who are you going to ask this from, right? You're going to ask the people that are using that product or service, right? If you're going to ask Kenny, the shipping manager, how good that supplier was, he'd give you a thumbs up, right? I mean, everything's on time. Everything was delivered. They had great schedules, and they brought donuts. Great. That's a good win. How is that service or product? A lot of times, especially where it's a major expense of yours, you've got a CEO, you probably with a supplier or suppliers, you probably have a a decent relationship with them if they're one of your major expenses like that. And so you might be able to answer that, but go ahead and ask the people in your organization that are actually, dealing with the suppliers. All right. That service or product. What is your supplier risk? Well, I think you can probably answer that better than most these days. Because you just need to understand is, look, do you have one supplier? Is that supplier outside the US? Is that supplier dependent on anything coming from the US? You need to go through this matrix of where the service or product is coming from. Are you a big fish in a small pond, or you're a small fish in a big pond, right? Something you need to know. And then where you really need to kind of get an idea, and where you really start doing the work is you're taking a look at your supplier terms, the actual agreements. Now, why is that so critical? Why would you do that? Can you imagine doing that for all your expenses? Remember, you're picking the one that's going to make a difference for you in 2022, right? It's a high dollar amount for you. It's a big percentage of your expenses. So this is where you're going to start getting your knowledge, right? Especially at multiple suppliers. You go through the terms, you're going to find out what's important to them, right? And what's important to you, and what makes this holistic approach go with your pricing. Why that matters is you'll find all sorts of gems in there. Now, here's the challenge. The chance of you finding your supplier agreement is low if you're like most companies, right? Guess who has your supplier terms typically? Your supplier, right? Your purchasing folks don't have it. Your legal counsel doesn't have it. And so sometimes you just need to go back to the suppliers and just ask them, hey, can we take a look at the agreement? I've lost my copy, whatever you need to do. But you can't really go much beyond that, because the supplier terms are going to tell you a few things, right? In particular, look at your surcharges. And this is how you're going to know, what kind of things are important to them, right? If getting a delivery, if they're guaranteeing you a certain timeframe delivery or a certain quality based on, how much time you're giving them in advance, great. If you're looking at something like, let's say you have a massive freight bill, right? You may find that on your terms you're getting hit with surcharges for incorrect addresses. There's all sorts of things, but you're going to find those as you go into the terms. And this is that first bit of slogging, right? That you're going to go through to what you're trying to do is understand yourself, the purchase of the expense, and your relationship to the suppliers. That's all you're doing right here, right? Of your existing suppliers. And how do you find out, what kind of priority you are, right? Well, look at the type of account manager you have. That's first and foremost, right? Do you have a executive vice president, or you're dealing with the CEO of a supplier, or you're dealing with an account manager, right? And a lot of it, if they're a national or international firm, and sometimes you can just ask them, right? What percentage are we in your top 10, top 50% here locally, regionally, nationally? Where do we fit in? It's important for you to know, because you don't want to find out if you're the small fish in the big pond by all of a sudden when supply chain becomes an issue, that your suppliers are actually dropping you, right? They're actually saying, hey, we just can't supply you anymore at that price or these terms, and they just walk away from you. It has been horrific in my 30 years of looking at these things. I've never seen this sort of abandonment, and suppliers know this is a bad deal, right? But they're also stuck not knowing, what to do next, right? They are looking at spreadsheets and trying to figure out how to stay viable themselves, right? All right. So we'll get into a little bit more about that later. Now let's talk about, what, on this one expense, you now have a very good idea of who you're dealing with, the suppliers, what kind of terms you've got, what they've offered to you, what you've been, what kind of quality that is. But now you need to know, all right, well, that's who I've got now. Who are the people, who are the companies out there that are actually players in this game, right? And a lot of times we don't really go that far, right? We'll take a look at 2 or 3. We have this, I call it the evil rule of thumb, right? Let's get at least 3 bids or something like that, right? Well, when you're dealing with one of your major expenses at your company, that is not the way to go. You better know all the players. Remember, this is one of your crazy valuable expenses, one of your direct expenses to you. So, that rule of thumb works great if you're buying pens or pencils or something like that, from Office Depot, but it does not work when you're trying to do something that has such a major impact on your business, right? So you need to know who the players are, and how would you do that, right? You're going to want to find out and make a list: local, regional, national, and global potential players, or players in the business, right? In the field that you're in, right? In this this product or service. And you make a list, and sometimes that list can be quite long. But when we talk about, what we're trying to do is talk about maximizing, the cash that you're going to generate in 2022. You're going to have to go through this process, right? All right. So let's see how you do it. How would you do that first? Well, gosh, guys, even us great experts, people that know, we're gonna Google the heck out of it, right? We're gonna try to find out, hey, who are the suppliers out there, right? We're gonna go all the way out to Alibaba in China and all the way down locally to the local mom and pop shop, right? And you go through that process, and everybody here would know how to do that. But you're also, and this is why you send your buyers out to these purchasing conferences or industry conferences, because they're going to network. Now, there's typically a lot of suppliers in these conferences, but what you're also doing is you're networking with other people that have similar buying needs to you, right? So that's going to be a key component of it, trade and associations. And then you just do regular networking events, right? Look, if you are in Texas, and you're a small manufacturer, well, you probably should belong to the Texas Association of Manufacturing, right? Or the San Antonio Association of Manufacturing, or there's literally hundreds of associations. Now, do you belong to all of them? No. But remember, we're talking about your number one expense you're looking at in 2022. You want to get a good feel of, hey, how am I going to know and find these players, right? What are we doing now? Right. And not everybody, in fact, very few people like to go out and network that way. But if you go in with a purpose, you're actually going to find out some key information. All right. So here's one that may blow your mind, but is very, very effective. And they're not sharing IP or anything like that. But what you do is you use that wonderful thing called LinkedIn. You've got colleagues at even competitors or competitive industries. And hey, take them to lunch, make a connection on LinkedIn, and just share war stories. You're not sharing any of your IP, right? But just talk about, hey, you know what? I've got this thing here. I'm trying to buy this wood. Have you guys been running a shortage out of Oregon with that stuff? And it's just normal. You would just be surprised at how much information you'll get just by reaching outside of your own circle, right? Now, and again, would you do this for all your expenses? No. You're just going to work on the one, right? This is the one that's going to make you tens of thousands of dollars in cash or hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash in 2022. So is it worth your time or one of your key lieutenants to do? Absolutely. All right. So now we've talked about how you're going to find these guys. Let's talk about what you're trying to go for, right? A lot of times you think, hey, I just want some more margin on this expense, right? Any break I get, I'm going to see in the bottom line, right? I'm trying to generate cash, and not all companies. I know I've got some of you CEOs out there that, frankly, I don't need any more cash, right? In fact, I've got too much cash, right? We need to be able to invest that in some other things. But so that may not be a priority for you. But something like reducing your inventory is, right? You're looking at a capital expense of expanding, like a distribution or warehouse. I remember going into a company that, they had a lot of cash, and they had a lot of cash burning up in their warehouses, right? And they were so fearful of stocking out of any one little thing, and they had over 3,000 line item products, that they just kept building on massive warehouses to everything, right? So I know that's not what you're about, but you got to make sure that, hey, am I trying to get this product or service in such a way that my inventory, we're not carrying so much, we're able to cash flow better. Are you trying to come up with a way to come up with a better delivery model, right? And it goes to the other point of inventory reduction, right? I'm not talking about just in time. I'm just talking about a reasonable level of delivery where you're not going up and down in your service to your clients or customers. And then, of course, risk mitigation. That may be the biggest thing for you, especially now where it's like, hey, I need to know everybody involved. I need to know where to get this, because frankly, if this expense, this line item, all of a sudden I can't pay it because it doesn't exist, I may go under. That's one of the reasons that it's a good expense for you to look at in 2022, right? So you can see all these things, risk mitigation, delivery, cash, margin, these are all things that you need to look at, but kind of list them in your own weighted way, right? Take a look and say, hey, what, actually price and margin is by far the most important. And if that's the case, then you're going to probably take advantage of the 2% discount they offer you if you pay within 30 days. If cash is most important to you, you say, forget the discount, right? I just want my cash. So anyways, there's just different ways you're going to look at it, but you need to go through the process yourself to find out, hey, what matters to us? What are we really looking for here? All right. So we've gone through all this work already, and we haven't done anything, right? We haven't done anything to the bottom line. We've done a lot, but we haven't gotten to the point where, hey, how do we get the best terms, best pricing? How do we mitigate our risk? How do we handle inflation? How do we do those things, right? And this is where the art and the science of the negotiation actually comes in, because you've just armed yourself with a lot of knowledge. What you don't know yet is really, any benchmarks and, how much should you be paying? Well, you're about ready to find that out, right? So what you want to do is you're going to go out to bid, right? You're going to put together a packet. And it's this expense, right? You're going to put together a packet, and it could be digital, of course. It's not necessarily a manila folder, but this is where you're going to spend a lot of time. And you almost need to think of this exercise like it was a public relations exercise, right? And it's not just simply send over a spreadsheet, tell them to sharpen their pencils and give you some numbers. And we're going to hit that right now, okay? The things I'm going to talk to you about are the things you're going to do to avoid Bob. Okay. Bob is a guy. It's a guy that hasn't bathed in years, probably. He's in the basement of your supplier's headquarters. There's no windows in Bob's office. It's probably, it's like, dirty white walls, right? But he's got some really state-of-the-art computer equipment, and he's got spreadsheets, right? And Bob's job is to look at the mathematical models that gives you your pricing in terms. He doesn't care who you are. You're a number to him, right? And most companies, any suppliers of any size, have Bobs, right? People that are really, it's a formulaic approach to giving you your pricing. Bob puts in fudge factors like, oh, you say your volumes will be X. He knocks it down by 20% because he figures you're lying, right, to get a better price. And there's all sorts of things and fluff built in. People have different levels of Bobs, but there's always a Bob. And what you're going to try to do is overcome Bob, overwhelm Bob, go around Bob, so that while you still will do and appeal to Bob's science side, you're also going to apply, take advantage of the art side and really sell your case. So first thing you want to do is you're going to share your history. You're going to talk about your business, how you've done, right? How'd you do in 2020 when COVID hit? What's 2021 look like, right? How'd you guys start this business to begin with, right? It's important. You're creating your story. Who's this important for? It's not Bob. Bob doesn't care, but your account manager cares, and she's going to get it up to her CEO, and your CEO cares. She cares, because that supplier CEO is like, hey, could be a great partner. I didn't realize this company was doing that, right? Or the executive VP of sales for your supplier, because the CEO and that executive VP can overcome Bob, right? And say, hey, Bob, you need to treat them as X, Y, or Z. So you're going to share your history. Again, we're talking one page, right? Share your current state. Here's where we're at now. Here's what we're hoping to achieve, right? This is why we're going to you on this particular product or service. And then please share your growth plans. Here's where we're going. Here's why we think we need to look at this now. We're trying to mitigate risk. We're trying to grow dramatically. We're trying to do some things, meet the needs of our customers. We want you to be a part of it. You're now creating, this is a side that is so overlooked all the time. I would say maybe 10% of companies that on any expense are going to the suppliers. They go out, to bid or request for proposal. They're not doing this stuff, right? But it's crucial to driving the conversations that you're going to have later on. All right. Share your data. What I mean by that is get the old spreadsheet out. Don't show pricing. talk about it a little bit. Just show the last 12 months, how often you bought that service or product, the date that it was purchased, date it, you used it, whatever it was, the quantities, all that stuff. Get it in a spreadsheet and get it to them. Make sure your pricing or costing isn't on there. And then I want you to do something that's so critical and so overlooked. And this is where you guys that tell them to go sharpen the pencil can give a rip about. But it's so important. There's a good chance you're using suppliers that you love, right? They always deliver. And one of the challenges that you have, and this is before you go out to bid, right, is that your incumbents may not be your best pricing. In fact, very likely they won't be if you go out to other people, right? And it's not a question of whether or not they're, someone else is hungrier. It's about face saving, all right? With your incumbents, right? If they come off too far their existing pricing, they don't want you to think you've been screwing them for years, right? And they haven't. But, I don't think any of your incumbents will be intentionally going, oh, we're going to get them as much as we can. But they will feel that way. So they can't come back to you with pricing they prefer to come to you with because it's going to lose face and potentially hurt the relationship you have with them. So you've got to do something very critically important. As you as CEOs, boy, this is critical for you. Even if you stepped in right here and you called the incumbents in one at a time, right, and said, hey, you guys are fantastic. We love what you do for us. You guys have done this, this, and this. You helped us this issue in 2020, 2021. You guys are great. But hey, as good business people, we look at our expenses as such a critical expense to us. We're going to look at it again. It's been the 3-year mark. We're going to do this. But here's what we want you to understand, right? We don't think, you guys have been great for us, but we're not sure we've done everything we can with you. And we don't think we've given you the information you need to have, right? So we're going to provide you with this stuff. Here's some new things. And we'd like you to take a look again at where we're at and how we fit. Maybe there's some national or regional programs we could take advantage of. But here's the data in a new way, right? So what are you doing here? What you're doing is you're giving them the story that they can go back and tell, right? And they're going to tell you that same story back. Hey, you know what? Thanks for sharing with us that new information. With that, we're able to go work with this other group over here, and we're able to give you Walmart pricing and terms, right? Give them the story that they need to tell back to you. And you can have your incumbents be just as aggressive as everybody else in this, okay? If you don't, you're increasing the likelihood that you may have to go to someone else simply because the margins are too great, right? Don't do that. If you love your incumbents, give them the story, okay? That's crucial, right? We like our incumbents, especially if they deliver well for us, right? So give them that story to give back to you so that they don't, it's not a face-saving exercise. It's actually a win. Wow, guess what we found? Thank you for giving us that information. Okay. So now you're going to say, hey, guys, here's what we're looking for. We'd like you to give us the pricing, right? Say, we're going to buy this much. Please, fill out this spreadsheet. Could be multiple items. Hey, give us the price for each one. Now, here's where you're going to request different terms, right? So you've kind of figured out, hey, what's their quality constraint? What's their delivery constraint? What's their, what's their discounting over time on cash, surcharges? Here's where you're going to set yourself apart, right? What you're going to do is they're going to see that you've got asks on different terms and services with the agreement. You're not just asking them to sharpen their pencil to give you a better price per quantity, right? Now they know that you're somebody that understands the buttons and levers that they can use. So they're not scared of losing your business by not just coming with a cutthroat price and leaving a bunch of stuff hanging in surcharges in your agreements, right? So it's now a holistic process. You've opened the negotiation to a much better situation, right? And so once you start asking for different qualitative things from the things that you've learned from terms and speaking their language, they know you're a real player and they know that they can work differently with you, right? They know that you're sophisticated. All right. Let me talk about quality real quick, because I know a lot of people are worried about, I'm going to leave my if I leave my incumbent, I'm going to lose quality or something like that. No, if you have bad quality, it's generally because of the quality or service of product. It's because it's your fault, really, right? It doesn't show up. I guess if you look at your supplier agreement, it just doesn't show up anywhere there, right? You're not identifying the specifications of whatever that quality. And again, it could be a service delivery thing. And the reason why that happens, this, guys, if you launch a product or a service, a lot of times you work with a key supplier to help you develop that, right? And I was working with a client once that they had this sexy box, right? It's very appealing to, it's a B2C product, very sexy. It looks awesome, right? Everything on the outside, it checks all the boxes, I guess pun intended. But what they were doing is, I remember they had there was a piece of dual side printed multicolor piece of corrugate on the bottom of this sexy box that nobody would even see or even would throw away. And I remember looking at that and go, man, that's an expensive piece of corrugate. And come to find out, they didn't need a 7mm dual or multicolor piece of, paper there, right? What they needed was about 2mm, and they needed, it to be black, and it doesn't need to be gloss because it had nothing to do with the overall packaging design, right? It was more of a protector. And so, that saved them 85% on that one expense, which is a pretty hefty expense as a part of this overall packaging. So just make sure you're kind of looking at, hey, remember, you're just talking about this one expense. This is something that matters to you. Remember, was you're getting overwhelmed thinking, oh my gosh, I need to do all these things. No, just focus on the one you're going to work in 2022. Make sure you understand the quality specs. Make sure you understand delivery. Ask this question of the supplier, because the supplier's they're going to ask you, okay, how often you want this delivered? We want it delivered Tuesday and Thursday. Great. Flip the tables and say, we would like this delivered Tuesday and Thursday. And when you go to bed with them, you're going to say, but which times would be preferable for you, right? I was working with a client a couple of years ago that they had asked this question. The supplier said, gosh, we never been asked that question before. And so they went to work. They came back a week later and said, we ship down to your county. We send a truck down every Wednesday. It's half full, but it's to a bigger client than you guys are. If you're willing to take shipments every Wednesday instead of Tuesday and Thursday, we can make that free on board to you, right? Because we're already sending the truck down, so we can make it free. And so they saw significant savings just by asking the question of, hey, when's a good time for you guys to deliver, right? Is there any value we can put to that? And the other thing is, make sure you get your volume right. Okay. So what I mean by that is, if you're going to have 2 or 3 suppliers, right, to mitigate risk, right, you just need to tell them up front, hey, look, 60% is going to go to the number one supplier. 30% is going to go to number 2. 10% is going to go to number 3. And if you're clear that way, they know that's happening anyways. And Bob's going to be putting that in his fudge factor on pricing down in the basement, right? So take that out, because this is what happens. Almost guarantee it to happen every time to you. If you do that, they'll come back to you. We'll say, hey, look, we understand you need to break it up for risk mitigation, but if you give us 80% and split the others 10 and 10, we'll give you as if we were doing more than 100%, right? Because they want to grab more of that share. Here's their time to grab it. So they're going to incentivize that way. So instead of Bob putting in a fudge factor, they're actually waiving the fudge factor themselves. Say, hey, let's get after this business. Let's get as much as we can. Right. So just be honest with them. Don't say, here's our volume and it's all available to you if you plan on cutting it. Right. Because my guess is they're going to come with tiered structures to you to account for that. And the more upfront you are, the more competitive they'll be, because they're going to just want more market share. Okay. Now, I put this slide in here, guys, because it happens so frequently, especially as I deal with executives who are going after this one expense, right? This expense is important enough. It's part of your board meetings. You're asking the questions. What happens is, when you've just sent this out to bid in the proposal, but this is as you're dealing with people, they've got questions and they're really going to work hard for you on this. And you'll see a request come to your email or whoever on your team is looking at it. And they'll say, hey, can you give us this bit of information? You send it down to Jim down in purchasing. Jim is awesome. He is very helpful. So he's just going to send them a spreadsheet for stuff that they didn't even ask for, right? Including pricing, right? Pricing leaks out in this way. If you don't have a single control point, pricing will get out. Now, what happens to your suppliers, your incumbents? They're like, holy crap, my pricing is out there to everybody, right? That's a major fiduciary breach, right? And if you're not an incumbent, you're like, oh my gosh, our pricing is going to be out there, right? So you've taken, and a lot of times you'll just have people pull out, right? And it's just because somebody got overzealous and gave them a whole bunch more data than they wanted to, including pricing. So make sure you lock that down. All right, when you implement it, you've got those 2 or 3 suppliers. This is a massive expense for you guys. You're going to see and can predict what your savings are going to be. More importantly, what your cash you're going to generate. Make sure you go to all the people that have touch points with the supplier. Make sure everybody knows, because you have people that will try to sabotage it because they don't get their donuts, or they like working with so-and-so, or they don't like the way the purchase orders come in, or whatever it is. Make sure you do that last step, because, and people will sabotage it unintentionally, right? You just need to make sure you drive it all the way through. Okay, so you've done all that. Make sure you make a partner out of a winner or winners. And what I mean, CEOs, is that this, remember, we talked about how big this expense is to you. You've done a heck of a lot of work on this. This type of expense, the supplier relationship of the service or product, is important enough to you. You may do a quarterly review of them and take the supplier out to lunch yourself to ask how they're doing, how we're doing, right? It's a relationship that you want to have. When things go south, like they will and like they have, that there's no way they're going to pull the plug on you guys because of the relationships you've built, okay? So make a partner out of that winner. And even if they're an existing incumbent, say, hey, this is such a critical, key strategic expense for us that this is going to be worth my time as CEO, right? And I think that's a very important thing to look at. All right, you've picked that one thing. Maybe there's 2. One of the things I worry about when I share this sort of thing with everybody is that, again, about a 10th of the way through, you start getting overwhelmed. But if you think about it from the one thing, pick the next thing, and that could be what's for 2023. Just work on this at a high level in 2022. And then work the next thing on 2023. But what you can do is make sure your procurement department is following these steps on a list of things that only you guys are good at, right? But these big ones are the ones that you and an executive or executive team should be looking at. All right. Let me talk briefly, like really, really briefly, before I answer any questions, is let's talk about inflation. So inflation is difficult, right? How do you deal with that? How do you know if you're saving? So think about it. You may find you're doing risk mitigation with just to survive with this major expense, right? It's going up. How do you know the negotiation that you're doing is really going to have a difference? Because at the end of the day, you're still seeing your expenses go up or stay the same, even though you negotiated something, So what you really need to get involved with, and that helps when we talk about, going to association events and things like that. You need to identify, I can almost guarantee you in your particular product or service that is this high on your list, is that there are third-party indexes, right? If you think about it from a terms of an inflation standpoint, right? You've got an inflationary index right now, right? From the U.S. national statistics. You could peg your pricing to an inflationary index for that particular product or service, or at the very least the national one, so that your pricing margin is tied to that inflationary index. So if inflation starts to go down, your price goes down. If it goes up, it goes up only in relationship to that index. And in both cases, you have a threshold, right? I mean, look, we're not even going to talk about this until it swings 1% either way. So then you have a dynamic price index that allows you to hedge a little bit, right? And will also help you to understand is, hey, you know what, we would have been paying X amount of dollars if we would have stayed in our current form. Now, the other thing that this does for you, it mitigates your risk, right? Your big risk of being dropped, right? I mean, where we've seen even larger customers and clients that get dropped because they have an agreement that's not dynamic, and inflation just blew by all those. So they'd rather destroy the relationship. The supplier would rather destroy the relationship than be held to that agreement. They'd say, you know what, we're out. We can't do it, right? And it's not like they're playing hardball with you. It's just like they can't lose money, right? So if you tie it to something like that, that's great. So think about things like even boxes or packaging or things like that. Well, there's a corrugate index. There's two or three different indexes that are similar, third party, that both supplier and you can agree to. Okay, so that's critical. So if it's a critical component, make sure that it's tied to an index in your pricing, and you can ask for that. And by the way, I wouldn't do any negotiated deal without something tied to a pricing index, even though it's not a traditional commodity. Okay, so what do you do then if you are a very small fish in a very large ocean? Okay, this is where that fluffy stuff comes in. Look, I'm a spreadsheet analytical guy, right? But I'm telling you, go fluffy, right? You are a CEO, you schmooze the heck out of them as if they were a customer, right? You want to invite the executive VP, or you want to invite the CEO to come down to see your little place, or you want to go golfing with your account rep's boss, right? You're just going to mitigate your risk in a place where you're dealing with monopoly or duopoly, where you are going to put the relationship at great priority to you as CEO, right? And that's if this is such a critical expense, right? And that's something you need to think about. All right, so what I'll do before I answer any questions, and I'm happy to answer questions, is if you need to take a look at what kind of things are important to you, like, hey, how would I identify that top expense? That's something we can help you with. If you're part of the CEO, you're part of REF, just go to your group leader. We actually will take a look at your general ledger and give you a dashboard of things. It's not going to cost you anything, but you can go and take a look at what things are most important to you. We'll point those things out, things that only you can do, and maybe some things we can help you with as well. That's it.
Awesome, Charlie. That's a wonderful offer for our membership because, I think you've lined it out really well systematically, how to approach it. But there are folks who may not have the time or don't feel like they have the expertise, and to take advantage of that assessment would really give them that data to sit down and do their thing and get that more favorable pricing. Hey, I just want to ask you real quick. I think one of the things that comes up is many times there's just one supplier. And I'm wondering, if that's really in the best interest of an organization to have one major supplier, or what's the thinking on, do we cut more risk by having multiple suppliers, or how does that work?
Yeah, because sometimes, John, you could actually introduce more risk by having more suppliers, and this particularly is true in particular raw materials, right? Things that come in that really need a certain quality standard. It's something you just need to look at. All I'm saying is, if you're going to do that, if you're going to have one supplier, just make sure you have an incredible relationship with them. You need to go above and beyond. And so maybe one of the first things you ask your procurement team to do as a CEO is that you say, hey, where do we have just a single source supplier, right? And but you need to make that decision of, hey, does it make sense for us to have two or three? It's okay to have one. You just need to make sure you're careful with the risk, right? You need to mitigate and make a strategic decision to have a single source.
Yeah. So I know, in particular, I was talking with one of our members here in Denver, and one of the ways that they're trying to mitigate, I guess, inflation and the dual whammy of the supply chain interruptions is they're often taking more inventory on now at a lower price. And I'm wondering, I don't want to make it too broad a question, but what are your thoughts? Yes, they're minimizing the impact of pricing and making sure that they have product, but sometimes they're taking product in a different color than what they normally sell as well.
Sure. Well, let's go back. I call it the toilet paper Costco model, right?
Okay.
I mean, John, you could buy toilet paper, real soft quality toilet paper at a pallets level for cheaper per sheet, right? I mean, cheaper per roll, right? How long is it going to take you to get through those rolls, right? It's going to take a long time, right? So if you're cash heavy, great. Take advantage of that, right? Understand you're going to take on inventory carrying costs and things like that. But generally speaking, that's not a way to go. I would have said that in almost every case until we had supply chain, right? Nowadays, you would do that simply because you're more afraid that you're going to run out of toilet paper. You need to say, look, I need to, if I get a shipment every month, I need to make sure I at least have 3 months worth on hand, right? It's that old question, right? But I never buy for volume discounts on its own merits, right? It's always about, am I trying to hedge versus supply chain disruption, right? So that's the question. But I wouldn't, I just wouldn't recommend going through 5 years worth for that pallet of toilet paper, John, to save 10 cents per roll, right?
Yeah. Well, awesome. You've given us a very, comprehensive view of how to approach this very, very, in some ways, delicate dance, and given us some pragmatic ways to make sure we're taking all the things that really need to be viewed into consideration and applying them. And I thank you. We've also thank you for the generous offer for the members to be able to get a bigger picture on that data. And we look forward to bringing you back for a deeper dive in many of these other topics.
Thanks. Good luck, CEOs. This is a wild world out there. All of our experience goes out the window on the stuff that you're dealing with, the stuff that we're dealing with as CEOs. So I wish you well.
And happy holidays to you, Charlie, and to all our members and guests. Thank you.